Leave behind the safety of the Humblewood and travel down the Tangrip coast to the Bay of Palouche, home to both the Kingdom of Den and the Serpent Domain. But neither hold the true power of the bay, for that lies in the sea itself and the pirate lords that call her tides their own. The dread pirate Captain Bluebeak, Tiberius Fang, Kin the Bladeless, and Gabrielle LaFleur, the self-proclaimed pirate queen. Each one vying for power over the very tides themselves. But do any of them really have what it takes to hold up the legacy of the briny bulldog? Tune in each week to find out if our little crew has what it takes to stand up to the pirates of the blood-soaked waters. Dark Fortunes is available every Monday on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Play. Set sail for high seas adventure.
This is Tabletop Babble. I'm James Introcaso. Today on the show, I am talking with the one and only Dr. Megan Connell, who you may know from Clinical Role or any of her other many pursuits that combined RPGs and therapy together. This is just an amazing chat with one of the world's greatest human beings, a true psychologist, and just a true good-hearted person. So let me get to my interview with Dr. Megan Connell. Okay, everybody, now I'm here with one of my favorite people in the whole world, Dr. Megan Connell. Welcome to Tabletop Babble. For people who don't know, who are you and what do you do in the tabletop role-playing game industry?
Oh, thank you for having me here. So I'm Dr. Megan Connell. I am a board-certified psychologist. I do private practice out of Charlotte, North Carolina, where I run 3 different groups where we use Dungeons & Dragons as a therapy tool. My groups are for girls, and we call it the Self-Rescuing Princess. And so in these groups, I help girls find their voice and find their power through playing D&D. It's something I'm super passionate about. I've gotten to travel around and talk about it. I've also developed or co-authored a training on how to use D&D therapeutically with Dr. Rafael Bocamazzaro from Take This. And then I have co-authored a chapter on applied use of tabletop role-playing games for an upcoming geek therapy book, edited by Dr. Anthony Bean.
Wow, that's awesome. You are using D&D to do great work, and that's why it's super exciting to have you here. I feel like this is a thing that you've been doing for years, and just in the last year, I've really seen lots and lots of articles about other people doing what you and Dr. Raphael are doing. And certainly I had seen, smatterings here and there before, but it really seems like using tabletop role-playing games as a tool in therapy is coming more and more into vogue. Is that true, or have I had my head in the sand?
No, it really is. So I'm not the person who pioneered this. It's kind of hard to figure out who exactly was the first person to come up with this idea. We know that the Bohana Group's been doing it for a number of years. RPG Research Team, they were also using D&D therapeutically. Aspiring Youth out in Seattle, Wheelhouse Workshop, which has now become Game to Grow, which is a nonprofit group that uses role-playing games and other games for psychological reasons, have all been using it. So we've all been working kind of in tandem. But one of the big things that I'm really proud of that I've done is through my company, Geeks Like Us, that I'm the co-founder of, we started a live play D&D show called Clinical Role, where all of my I'm the dungeon master for that, and all of my players are other therapeutic GMs and DMs. And so it's been this wonderful way for all of us to come together and collaborate and build friendships. And so we come off from the philosophy of we're better together. So we're not competing with one another. We are cheering each other on and giving pointers and trying to help one another out as much as possible. And so it's really exciting to see the work that we're doing together and that we're cross-promoting each other. And one of the big things that all of us have been doing is calling for research. Because in the clinical world, it's one thing to see something and to feel like it's therapeutic, but it's quite another to actually have the data that shows this actually does help. And we just don't have that, unfortunately. And so we've been doing this really big call for research, and it's been super exciting. In January, I think I consulted with 5 or 6 different people across the globe doing research on D&D. I had one day where I did a consult with someone from England, then I did a consult with someone from South Africa and Germany later in the week. so so it really has been taking off. Honestly, in the past 6 months, it seems like there's just been this fire and really big interest for people to get grants written and to get research happening, and more groups are opening up all over the place.
Wow, that is so cool. Why do you think D&D, it seems like, and again, I'm making an assumption here, but it seems like people think it is an effective tool for use in therapy. Why do you think that is?
I think there's a few different reasons for it. One is it's rewarding to play. It's fun and engaging to play. And so we know with the research on group therapy that group therapy is incredibly effective. It's actually minute for minute more effective than individual therapy. But the problem is you can't get people to show up for group therapy. And so like it doesn't matter if you have the best therapeutic intervention out there. If nobody's coming to it, it doesn't do any good. And so because playing a game is rewarding in and of itself, people want to show up week after week and they can have a lot of fun. A lot of the clientele who we work with within the tabletop role playing community have had a lot of therapy and just haven't always found their community, have kind of felt isolated and alone and just penalized for being who they are. And so coming in and getting this experience of getting to play and connect with other people and just to enjoy themselves, it seems to work really well. And what ends up happening is the therapy sort of comes in. I always use this term. It comes in sideways. It's like it comes in under your armor, right? You got your guard up front, but like the issues and stuff, they kind of come in under that and they sneak in. Because and I'm sure you've experienced this with playing yourself, like your stuff can't help but show up at the table. Right?
Oh, I feel so seen. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, completely. Like, and honestly, like that's how I came to this. I've told the story many times, but for me, I had played 2 different characters, and while I was house cleaning one day, I was just kind of musing on my characters and coming at it from that psych perspective of like, all right, both these characters came from me. They have to have something in common. And when I figured out the thing that tied them and the thing that united them, I was like, oh, this is what Megan needs to work on. Like, and it was really shocking because in a lot of ways, I was like, wow, that would have taken probably years in therapy for me to really uncover and understand at the level I just did in 3 minutes of analyzing 2 characters.
Wow, that is really incredible. So are you finding, are you still sort of uncovering the potential of role-playing games as a tool?
Most definitely. We're trying to figure out where the safe boundaries are and what that looks like and how to do this. It's both exciting and terrifying getting to use D&D therapeutically. It's exciting because it's new. It's never been done before. And we're discovering new techniques and new ways to do things. And it's terrifying because it's new and it's never been done before. And we don't know what mistakes are out there, right? So there's a lot to consider when trying to play the game. And, how much do you push people? When we're talking basic safety tools, right? We want to talk about our no-go topics. But in therapy, sometimes you have to go towards no-go topics to help push growth. And so where are those lines? How do you navigate those waters and what do you do with it? How do you process things? And it's really amazing to think about, and it's a lot of responsibility as well.
It's something I think we don't think about, like you said, in our home games, because often the idea is to not go there, right? Or to avoid going there. Why did you think that this would be a good tool for girls and young women?
For me, it was there were all these groups, and I was noticing lots of boys in the groups. And just all the time there were boys. And like as a woman, I wanted other women to play with. And I knew that there were women out there playing, and I wanted to find that and bring that in. And for me, getting to stand up as my character and to say her truth really was helping me in some ways figure out how, the human behind the character could stand up. And I wanted to see, like, can that help other girls? And so I decided I did a pilot group of girls. I think I had 4 in that first group. And it was 3 or 4 weeks into the group. And one of the girls stopped me after the session and said, I just want to tell you something. And I was like, sure, what is it? And this was a girl who was a very much a people pleaser and would just do stuff because people asked and not necessarily because she wanted to. And she was telling a story about how one of her friends was asking her to do something, such as give a ride or something like that, something she didn't want to do, but wasn't necessarily a big inconvenience. And she's like, I felt myself saying yes. And then I thought about my character. And I knew my character wouldn't say yes to this. I knew my character would say no. And so I said no.
Wow.
And that was the moment where I'm like, all right, this is the thing. This is where I'm excited. I want to help these women, feel empowered and to find their voice and to work out there. And so there's, I guess, selfishly, a few reasons that I do the groups for girls. Like I said, I want more girls playing. I I really think tabletop role playing games are, if we think about the games girls are generally drawn to when they're younger, which is like a play pretend. That's what D&D is. And so, like, it really is a wonderful extension of childhood play pretend. And so I want to see more girls playing. Um, and I also wanted to create that community that I just to disclose, like, I didn't feel like I had as a child and I didn't have among my own gender. And so that was something important to me. But then also, we've had a slew of research come up in the past 3 or 4 years ago now that was really showing us that women are terrible to one another. Um, when you're asked to evaluate another women will be much harsher than men are in
Really?
evaluation. Yeah. And if you think about it, we have this sort of queen bee attitude that we perpetuate in girls. I believe this is a cultural thing. I don't think this is like ageist. This is how women behave everywhere because I don't think we see it everywhere. But that idea of like mean girls and people who cut each other down. And so I wanted to have a space where girls can learn how to cooperate and collaborate and not be competitive, how to pass the spotlight around among everyone and to work together as a team and not to undercut each other.
Wow, that is fascinating. I have so many non D&D questions about that. Part of me is like, has the essentially like a patriarchal society instilled that in women that they should be competitive and judge one another so that we can remain on top either consciously or subconsciously, right? Again, because of the patriarchy, right? Is this a side effect of that?
It might be. We don't know. That's more, we need, I think, anthropological studies around that type of question. But it's really interesting. And to that end, though, like, I also have known that this group is creating success. I got to meet with a parent of one of the girls in my group, and they just said, yeah, I just mostly wanted to meet you just to say hi and to say, like, whatever you're doing, keep it up. Because it's like, they were saying, I see my daughter with their friends from school, and it's a lot of backhanded compliments and tearing each other down and stuff where it's saying nice stuff, but it's not really nice. And then I see her with her D&D friends, and they are laughing and they are being supportive of one another and they are cheering each other on. And there's none of that backhanded compliments. There's none of that backstabbing that I see with them. And again, that's where I'm like, okay, yes, we're getting the mission of the group out there.
That is great. And that is huge to see that impact like that. And what about you? When did you get your start with role playing games? Like, when did you first lay hands on a tabletop role playing game?
I was in middle school. I don't ever remember getting to hold the actual book. This was in the early 90s, to date myself here, so I don't even know what edition we were playing. But this was back when you didn't get a character sheet. You got a piece of notebook paper and you wrote strength and you had to hand write everything out. And it was a lot of just making characters for fun. I was very obsessed with Lord of the Rings, and Legolas was my favorite, so I made lots of Elven Rangers. um, but it was just stupid fun that we had together. I One of my favorite things that we did was we would create magic spells, and my friends created a spam spell that when you cast it, it dealt, I forgot what type of damage, but if it reduced the target to 0 hit points, it turned them into like 1d4 days of rations.
Oh.
So some sort of transmutation that turned you into spam if you died. And it's just, goofy stuff like that where we were just walking around kind of making things up. This was still at the very tail end of the Satanic Panic, and so we're kind of still dealing with that stuff, but it was a lot of fun. Then I fell away from it in high school, and I didn't really get back into D&D until I actually watched Will Wheaton's Titan's Grave. And that got me back in. I was like, God, I had so much fun playing in middle school. Let me play this again. And then I started watching Critical Role, and I was like, I want to play D&D. And got back into it. And we did a home campaign where we ran the starter set. And then through Roll20, we found a group to play with. And that was 4 years ago. We've been playing every week on Sunday for 4 years, and we've only missed a handful of games in all 4 years.
That is amazing. So I want to ask you about Clinical Role, because my impression of it when I first heard about it was like, oh wow, this is going to be like heavy therapy, and we're going to be talking about things, and it is really just a D&D game with people who happen to be therapists, and it is super fun.
Yeah, and that's also one of the other points of it, is to humanize therapists. I think people still have this concept of, therapists are, the bearded man who's going to have you lay on the couch and talk about your mother and stuff. And no, we're just other goofy humans who laugh at stupid jokes and make lots of puns during their games. And just that idea to demystify what a psychologist is and what a therapist is, and to help people understand that we are just other people as well, and that it's okay. We do have some therapeutic themes that pop in, like every now and then we'll do we had some behavioral reinforcement happening a few sessions ago. But no, it is really just a fun game. It's a bit intimidating for me because all of my players except for one are dungeon masters. And know the monster manual inside and out and know what's going on. And so there's that challenge for them of not metagaming, but it's a lot of fun and very goofy. And like I said, it is our chance to relax and build friendships as well, and to share what we do and what we love with the world.
How would you describe sort of your DM style as far as your prep for your game goes and things like that?
Oh, well, I am a recovering over-prepper. I was super nervous for the first 10 or so games, maybe even more. I would say, like, if you are new to Clinical Role and you want to jump in, start around session 17. That's about where I feel like I kind of hit my stride as a DM and kind of figured things out. But there was a lot of prepping going on and trying to figure out. Now, one of the things I've really done is I've built out the world, and I know what's going on in the greater world of the campaign. And so now what the players decide to do at any given time, like I can adjust what's happening around them. So like they choose to go right rather than left. I still have an idea of what's happening to the left and how long that's going to take. And so if they come back to it eventually, they can pop back in there. And so there was a lot of prep up front on building the world, but now it's not so much. The one thing that I do that I think makes Clinical Role a little different from other live play games, though, and in the prep that I do, is at the very top of my prep notes, I have each character's name, and I have an emotional goal for them for that session. And so it's not anything like I want them to confront their childhood fears or something. It can be something like my friends need me, or I'm worried about this character. Or one of my favorites for a character was the world is not what it seems, or the world isn't what I thought it was. I've shared this story, and I don't think Dr. B minds me talking about it, but that was an emotional point for his character, where his character went back to where he was from, and he had this idea of what it was like, and then coming back to it as an adult, finding out it was very different from the narrative he had built in his head. And so it was this interesting turn, and trying to understand, like, wow, maybe my perceptions aren't always reality, and what does that mean for my character, and how do I grow from that and develop beyond it? And it makes for a really interesting story, because then I'm not as worried about like the details of the NPCs and things like that. It's more about how can I keep this message going? How can I get this into your character and weave it into your narrative?
Hey everyone, we're going to take a quick break and then back to the babble.
Are you looking for a great story? Do you love Star Wars? Do you like podcasts?
If you said yes to any of these, check out the Redemption Podcast.
Well, I have less in my head than you do normally, probably.
You haven't met the crew I'm with. Pretty much everywhere we go, our life is in danger.
Things didn't explode. That's pretty sneaky for us.
That sounds horrible.
Yes, please finish up whatever underhanded thing you're doing on the computer terminals at the Jedi Temple.
Check out Redemption Podcast at www.redemptionpodcast.com.
Let's get back to the babble. How do you come up with these emotional goals? That sounds really cool, and it does sound like I said, I know the games that you play on Clinical Role are not therapy, but it does sound like something a therapist is sort of uniquely qualified to think of as a tool that we can all use in our games.
Most definitely. And I think it's a very cool prep idea of, looking at where your character is and sort of that thing of like, where is it that they need to grow? Where is it that they need to develop the most? And how do we challenge that? And how do we help them find that? I also need to be clear here too. I do this with the consent of my players. So for example, Adam Johns, who plays Bairden, he is a very super goofy gnome who thinks he's a dwarf druid. And what was going to happen on his arc was he was going to learn how to take responsibility and be more serious and grow up. And so I had a talk with him. I didn't tell him like what the exact beats were that we were going to hit, but I said at the end of this arc, like he's going to have a bigger understanding of the world and of responsibility. And there's still a lot of space in there for him to be goofy, but he's going to lose that innocence in this arc. Are you okay with that? Will that make the game not fun for you if he isn't so innocent and wide-eyed about the world? And he said no. He's like, he trusted me to do, take the campaign and take that story where it needed to. And so we did. And it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think that's great. I really think some of the best D&D campaigns, especially when they're long term, are good when you see character growth. I think the same is true of a television versus a movie, right? Over the course of a movie, a character may or may not change a lot. That's like your one shot. But over the course of 6 seasons of a television show, I expect to see a lot of growth in characters, right? It changes up the show, and it presents new opportunities, I think, for the actors, for the writers, for the audience who engage with the property that way. I like that. It's sort of like you're running your game like a writer's room for a television show.
Yes. Yeah. In a lot of ways. And looking at that. And like, if anybody's wanting to think about how to do this for their character, some good cliff notes from psychology would just be look at lifespan development. Mm-hmm. All of us kind of get stuck in different parts of our lifespan, and that's why we need therapy and go in and get that right. That's why we really talk about your mother. No, but maybe it's your character was betrayed, and so they trust people, but they don't trust people. And so we could kind of look at that and go, okay, this is like an early attachment kind of thing, and how do these different theorists talk about early attachment and what challenges come up that help people attach well, and again, this isn't to become a therapist. That is inappropriate. Don't do that. But it's more from that writer's perspective of looking at, Piaget's stages of change versus like Freudian stages of change. And how do we come through that and going, all right, so if this person, doesn't feel secure in the world and they always need to have a get out bag, and you want to help them get to that character to get to that point where they do trust that their friends are going to be there. What's that going to look like? And what's that journey going to look like? And again, do that with the consent of your players.
Right.
Maybe they want to play that brooding character for their whole campaign.
Sure. I think as DMs, we are sometimes afraid to go to places like that because we don't have the character's permission, but the idea of like having a conversation with the player is revolutionary.
Yes. Well, it's why I had a talk at PAX 2018 where it's basically like how to have adult conversations with your players. Mm-hmm. If people are having problems in your game, how to talk to them. One of the subreddits I go to quite frequently, they created a whole tag for player problems, and someone created this thing they called it the flow chart. And I think it's hilarious because the very first step on the flow chart is, have you talked to them like an adult? And what's fascinating is so many times like that question gets asked is like, have you talked to the player? And they're like, well, no.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
Mm-hmm.
why are you talking to us? Right.
Yeah, it is true. I see that a lot on forums that, hey, I have this player and here's this really elaborate scheme I have thought out to, put the player in their place, for lack of a better term. And then the comments are often like, or you could, talk to your player about what they're doing and how it's disrupting the table and that kind of thing. And I think
Yeah.
so much of that, for me, some of that is held over from playing games as a 10-year-old, right? That I didn't have the tools, the emotional tools to have those conversations. And so when I play the game, it takes me back to that. And when someone's being a bully, I think about ways to punish them in the game, as opposed to saying, hey, you're being a jerk. Let's talk about why. Let's talk about what you need. Let's talk about what I need, right?
Yeah, and those are hard conversations to have, and that's another project that I've done and kind of am continuing to do is through Geeks Like Us. Is I have the series Psych at the Table where I talk about psychological issues as it relates to gaming and how you can use teachings of psychology to help yourself in the games. And this is um, again, this was also born out of Reddit because reading through comments with my clinical eye, reading stuff and going, gosh, it sounds like this player that they're having trouble with is depressed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard if your friend's depressed. Like, how do you help them? Or, geez, it seems like this person's super anxious, or they're describing mathematics disorder. And so I did these videos with the hope that it could give GMs the tools to help their friends out. Again, not to make them therapists, more to go, okay, I notice when I'm asking you questions in the game, you get anxious. Well, let's come up with some strategies. Maybe it's can I give you two options and then you pick which option you want to do to help them get through and to continue to play and not let their anxiety get in the way of playing the game, or to facilitate these different discussions. And also we did talk about a little bit of what to do when things are difficult and how you have conversations, how to apologize when you goof up.
Are there some common pitfalls that you have observed that happen in games that could be avoided with conversations? Like, is there in your reading of Reddit, is there a common problem among players that it's like, oh, this problem again?
Yeah, lack of session zero.
Mm.
So session zero is the session you have before the campaign starts to make sure everybody is playing the same game. And if you can get everyone to play the same game, to agree upon what the rules are, what's going to happen, and to all have the same buy-in, and also to give people the option to leave before there's investment of more time, that just prevents so many problems.
Session zeros, I think, are a great thing, and it's something that I didn't discover until I was an adult, right? The idea of we're all going to get together and make characters, I think, was in my brain, but that there could be more to it than that, I think is huge. And it sort of goes along. The thing that I love about session zeros is I think they're super fun because I tend to also engage not just in the what game are we playing discussion, which is hugely important to have. You also then engage in the world building discussion, and the players sort of realize, oh, I can be more involved beyond controlling this one sort of character in the world.
Yeah, and I think that's something for DMs as well, is like, let go of control. Give your players more control in the world. It is so much better to collaborate than to dictate. Actually, over the last 2 sessions of Clinical Role, we've had players not be able to attend, so we did special one-offs. And actually, last night's game, the players created a whole island for me.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, like I knew the island was on the map, and I had named it, and it was a pirate island. And that's all I knew. And so we came up with what the government system of this island is like, how people get there, what life is like on this island, who it's inhabited by, and how, what kinds of things are happening there, the lore and the history of it. And we all came up with that together. And it was super fun.
And it took some of the burden of prep away from you as well, right?
Completely. Well, and here's the other thing too, is because what we did last night was a basically a flashback one-off game. So the actual characters that they play have not yet been to this island. Now they have huge incentive to want to go there because the players know what's there and they want to see it again, right? It's all that DM evil manipulation.
That's amazing. That's great. So in your prep, you sort of talked about when we were talking earlier about your players going left when you expect them to go right. How do you know when to pay off the consequences of not going left, right? Or not going right? Are there consequences? Do there have to be?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there definitely are consequences. But consequences don't necessarily have to be bad. They can be kind of fun too. This is spoiler for Critical Role if anybody wants to see it, but the very first arc that they went on was sort of my retelling or rehashing of is it Tomb of Annihilation, the one with the Serac? Yes. Okay. So I wanted to do something like that, but not as long of a campaign. And so kind of got the idea of Chult, and mostly also I love the zombie T-Rexes. Like that is my favorite monster in D&D, a zombie dinosaur that vomits out other zombies.
Yes.
I love that monster so much. But they had this choice when they came to the end is they met the lich that at the end, which I had changed to a mind flare lich, and they escaped. That lich escaped. And they had an option. There was an entrance that was going to lead down into the Underdark, or they could leave. And so they chose to leave. And pretty recently, they just met that lich again, as he was completely destroying a drow city that they were fleeing. Right? So there's some bad stuff happening in the Underdark, and they're aware of it. But what they choose to do with it now, that remains to be the question.
Yeah, that is that's great. And that it's those kinds of things. How do you keep track of your different threads, right? That aren't pursued or that are going to pay off later without going crazy?
I have a calendar for the year that the game's taking place in. And so I'll sit down and I'll reasonably figure out what's going on. And then sometimes there's some dice rolls that go along with it. So for the game that happened last night, I'm actually going to sit down with my husband today or tomorrow, and we're going to do a couple of dice rolls to kind of figure out what happened directly after that and how it's impacting the here and now. And then I'll make some notes. I just started using World Anvil. Not sponsored by them or anything, but I'm using it. I'm really liking it. And that seems to be helping too with understanding like just how to think about different locations and what to fill in and what questions to be asking. But a calendar is definitely, I think, a key to keeping track of how long it's taken your players to do things. And then you could kind of reasonably expect, like, for this lich is like, all right, how long would it take him to get to this level of power? Okay, so once he gets to that level of power, then he's going to do this. How long might that take? That would probably, and I might roll some dice and be like, okay, that's pretty reasonable. Okay, then he gets, hey, as he's at that level, they're there too. And so that's where the lines are going to intersect again.
Wow. The idea of keeping a calendar for your game blows my mind entirely. It's like I've never thought, let me, I might write the number of days that have passed, but I've never thought like, oh, let me in the future write down like this is the day. If X is not stopped, this is the day Y happens, right?
Well, and that's sort of fun for a few reasons, because one, it makes the world feel so much more real, right? And it gives that sense of urgency to what the players are doing. And this was something I noticed that Matt Mercer does on Critical Role as well, where the Mighty Nine came to a town and had just recently been ransacked by soldiers. And one of the things he was saying at the very end of the game after they closed up is he's like, yeah, if you guys had gotten there like a week before, you would have been there during this.
Right.
Now, was that true? Was that not him just kind of putting a spin on things? But like, it gives that idea of like that there is a calendar, that the world around the Mighty Nine, the world around my Ghostfang clan, it continues on even without them. It just gives that urgency to them to be like, we need to figure this out. We want to make our decisions matter.
Yeah, the idea that you could go into the Underdark and come out, and the world has changed in dramatic ways that you should have or could have never seen coming, is really very interesting. When I think about, right, in our world, our real world, the number of earth-shattering events that happen from day to day, either perpetrated by nature or humans or whatever it is. Imagine going underground for a month and then coming out, and how has the world changed? Has there been an election in some, super powerful country and the balance of power has shifted? Has there been some crazy natural disaster? Has there been something really good that happened? Some new industry that's popped up. Like if you disappeared during the rise of the internet and then came back and the internet was there, the world's entirely different.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm going to start keeping a calendar for my games now. That is great.
That's awesome. And again, like Adam Davis, one of my players, he was asking what the cycle of the moon was one time. And I said, oh, hold on, let me look it up. And he was just like, I love so much that you're looking up the cycle of the moon, that this isn't a question that you're just making up the answer to, that you actually have an answer.
Yeah, well, having that prep is good, right? One of the things that I am always impressed by is that you go to many conventions, and when you do a lot of different panels. And I think this speaks to your idea of like, you can't just put all therapists in one bucket. We are all humans, just like everybody else, and we have a lot of things. We did a panel at PAX Unplugged together that you put together, which was amazing, about prepping, and that had nothing to do, as far as I know, with like actual therapy, right? So, what different panels do you talk about when you go to conventions? Because it seems to cover like a huge range of topics.
Yeah, there's a really wide range of topics. And like, I'd argue that there is a little bit of therapy in the prepping panel because it has to do with anxiety, right? And our desire to roll with what comes up and how much anxiety a person is able to sit with comfortably.
Oh,
right?
It was therapy. I missed it.
See, it came in sideways. It always comes in sideways. Now, I've done a few different panels where we talk about the applied use of role-playing games and how it's used in therapy and what that looks like. Also, just talking about geek culture and therapy and the intersection of psychology and geekdom and why that's important. And also, like, just how being a part of a geek culture and having that cultural identity can be very healing and important and empowering for us. I've done the conflict resolution panel where we talked about how to have difficult conversations at the table. I've done that one once where I moderated and once where Dr. B from Take This moderated. I've done a couple. Sorry, I did one on identity exploration through character growth, or through characters and making our characters at Gamehole Con. I'm going to be doing that one as well at GaryCon. So if anybody's going to be at GaryCon, I'll be talking about what you learn about yourself by rolling up a character.
Oh no!
Yes. Oh.
Oh no!
Well, here's the most fun takeaway from that. Imagine a party made up of nothing but the characters you have created.
Oh, no.
Right?
Sure. Yes. Yeah. They're all very loud and obnoxious, which I think says a lot. So
yeah. Yeah, right. It starts changing. We're like, oh, there's that thing, right? But prepping and running games is something I'm very interested in, because for me, very early on, that the DM role was always sort of sacred. And it was this big undertaking. And like, you are the master of this, dungeon master, game master. You were the master of this world. And it felt unobtainable. When I started stepping into the DM shoes, like, I had a lot of imposter syndrome of like, I don't belong here. I don't know the history of D&D going back to the first edition. And oh my God, how do I do this? But slowly, like, it's been demystifying and trying to figure out, like, how do we make this more manageable for people? Can we help encourage people to just go pick up the dice, pick up the GM screen, and just go for it? Have some fun running the game. It's not as scary as you might think. And it is also as scary as you might think.
Yeah. Wow, it's really great to hear. And I think what you are doing is just super wonderful with your panels, with Clinical Role. The work that you are doing with your practice, I think, is amazing. And I think you're a great human being. Like I said, one of my favorite people in the world, really. And so my big question for you is how do I convince my therapist to play D&D with me during our
Ooh.
sessions?
Well, have them come to my trainings that I do through Leyline. Well, I think there's this really big barrier, and so that's another hat I wear. I don't feel like I do a lot until I start talking about it a lot. And then I'm like, oh, I do. This is why I'm tired. I work with a company called Leyline, and we're doing certification and becoming a geek therapist. So we are arguing that being a geek is its own culture. It's its own specific cultural identity, and it's important. And that learning to play is very, very important. And learning how to connect with your clients, learning how to be there with them is just an incredible tool, and also just incredibly important, because you miss so much of the person if you don't talk about what they're interested in. My co-founder and colleague, Dr. Ryan Kelly, did I believe it was his doctoral thesis on what happens when you bring someone's special interest into therapy. And if you can use someone's special interest, whether that be D&D, whether that be Minecraft, comic books, anime, fan fiction, off the charts, the success rate goes up. Like, people are more invested, they feel more seen. You are meeting them where they are, and you're helping to create change in a meaningful way. There's a big challenge, though, because therapists and psychologists sort of have this idea of like, we have to be serious, we need to be taken serious, so we always have to be academic and incredibly serious. And the truth of the matter is you can be passionate and serious about your work while also goofing off and making pirate jokes. like they are not mutually exclusive. It's okay to play and have fun and to connect and to be human. And I think there's that fear of, I think there is a lot of imposter syndrome, well, all over the place. Let's just be honest. But that also means there's imposter syndrome in psychology. And I think that there's a lot of therapists out there who feel like, if my clients see that I have flaws, then maybe they'll lose their faith that I can help them. And that's not what this is about. A lot of us are great at helping other people out with stuff we're struggling with, But it's more that we can be people, and you can play, and you can have fun, and tell a good story, or be passionate about spinning up what theories you have about the next Marvel movie or whatever. And it's okay.
I can only speak for me, but I know that it helps me when I know that the person I am talking to, especially when I am in a therapy session, is someone who is flawed and can relate to me in some sort of way. So that is really great to hear. I know we are almost out of time here, so I hope you'll come back at some point, because I feel like we've just scratched the surface.
I'd love to.
In the meantime, where can people find you and all of the cool stuff that you're doing?
Follow me on Twitter at Megan Psyd. It's MEGANPSYD. I'm also on the Geeks Like Us Twitch channel, streaming Clinical Role every other Monday. Soon to be hopefully streaming some Minecraft as well.
Awesome.
And I'll be producing. We have a secondary game of Clinical Role that's going to be starting, GM'd by someone else. I'll be producing that one, so it'll get me to be sitting behind the screen.
Oh, wow.
Trying to make sure everything looks good.
That's amazing. That's great. Everybody should go check that out. We'll put up links over at don'tsplitthepodcastnetwork.com. Dr. Megan Connell, thank you so much for joining me today on Tabletop Babble. People, thank you so much for listening to this interview. If you want to support the show financially, you can head on over to patreon.com/Intricasso. That's patreon.com/Intricasso, where we are going to have all kinds of amazing goodies for you. I've been doing a lot of my dad's Monster Manual previews up on there lately. Go check them out. And hey, if you want to help other people find the show, you can do that for free. Head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. If you leave us a 5-star review with words, I will read it out loud. You can make me say anything you want. It is good fun. And if you've already left a review, or you're already contributing to Patreon, or both, thank you so much. You have no idea how much I appreciate that. Tabletop That Babble is a show on the Don't Split the Podcast Network that's edited by Nate Pausenga. Thanks to Rudy Batto for founding DSPN with me. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was provided by Battle Bards. Don't forget, RPGs are great.
Gather round, travelers, to hear our tale. Venture Maidens is an actual play 5th edition podcast made by 4 longtime friends and lifetime gamers. We take our role-playing as seriously as we keep our bulges tasteful. So if you're looking for an epic high fantasy tale spun by a killer cast, give us a shot. We publish new episodes every other week and live stream our game recordings on Twitch. Now get on out there and download Venture Maidens wherever podcasts are free. Hope to see you in the community, and don't forget to venture away.